Did you know that every time that the broader business cycle has changed, that our industry has actually changed like fairly fundamentally? This has happened like kind of historically. I'm going to run through this real fast for you just to kind of give you an idea of how important this is, because I think right now that our overall business cycle um, has changed, and that's going to lead to, again, another fundamental change in the financial publishing industry. And so like I want you to think about this, because this is kind of a meta macro view of where we've been and where we're going, right? So if you go back in the industry to like the 1990s, right, this was a direct mail business, and Agora was not the biggest publisher. Tom Phillips was. He had Phillips Publishing, and then there was after the crash of 87 and then going into the early 90s, there was a recession. And then a copywriter named Lee Euler wrote a promo called Plague of the Black Debt. And that promo kind of marks the shift from when Agora was a smaller company to becoming a larger one. And then throughout that whole business cycle, right, like the main product on Wall Street is the .com IPOs, right? Like the technological innovations that were happening with the internet, and like the .com bubble like grew. And then during that time, you had Motley Fool launch basically in the old AOL chat rooms in the 90s, right? And because of the broader market cycle with the .com kind of being like the hot thing on Wall Street, especially for the IPOs, the Motley Fool actually was able to leverage that and raise about $100 million in venture capital. And then the E-Trades of the world, right? They're coming in, and they're this huge innovation in retail investing, and they open up the online world to investors. And then we see the first actual like trading education boom, right? There was this day trading .com like stock boom that was so popular that it made it onto the cover of Time magazine, right? And now during this time, Phillips, who was the biggest, exits most of his businesses. His finance business becomes Investor Place, which does make the transition online and becomes mostly kind of an advertising business. In 2000, the tech wreck hits, right? We have like the .com bubble burst. Agora, like very, very effectively makes the shift to internet marketing, and the era of the e-letter really begins. And a bunch of them were dominant direct mail publishers that were kind of big besides Phillips during the 90s. They kind of die a slow death. Some of them aren't around at all. Some of them are just smaller publishers that are around, but that really kind of transforms a whole lot of things. And then in this new environment in the early 2000s, Google was the main new marketing player, and all this acquisition that we were doing, right, was driven by like Google pay-per-click and search engine optimization. And we had like this Wild West ROI, and it was almost impossible not to make money with pay-per-click for a while. And so on the internet marketing side, we have like the rise of Google, and you have like the internet marketing world gets um, anything that's traffic related is easy to sell, right? John Reese and Jeff Walker do their first Traffic Secrets, which is literally the headline launch in 2001. That's the first like $1 million day in internet info marketing history. And so like you have like this whole period where the internet marketing world is exploding, hot list launches and everything, and affiliate marketing are the rage. The FTC comes in and hammers it, and they go after people like Frank Kern and other folks. Internet marketing doesn't die. It evolves into a massive set of new industries. Agora grows really rapidly during this period, right, with their ecosystem kind of approach. And the idea of direct response marketing really takes hold in the internet marketing world, because everyone realizes, hey, you can track everything. And so that means that direct response is the dominant marketing paradigm that takes over, right? So you had like copywriters was like the new skill and stuff like that. And now on the Wall Street side, mortgage-backed securities were the product, right? And real estate explodes. In the 2000s, you have the real estate boom happening. You have the internet marketing boom happening. Forex comes into the scene. That's the next kind of like trading education kind of thing that hits. And the other like second major product on Wall Street is really the rise of China, right? These geopolitical changes that are happening. And Jim O'Neill, who was the head of international research at Goldman Sachs at the time, publishes a paper on the BRICS, which is, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And it's kind of a marketing piece that ties them all into one idea and sells them as like the next big thing going forward. Trillions of dollars flow into all the products around China. In FinPub, we start building franchises around that idea. We see promos like Ignore China, Lose Money. Eric Patel had this great promo for Weiss that was in direct mail still. It was the 6 Giants of Unstoppable Profits. Then the iPhone comes out in 2007, right? Internet traffic starts to explode. kind of starts to change the game. The bubble in mortgage-backed security pops, and we get the 2008 crash, which just like the bubble in .com stuff crash, and we got the tech wreck. FinPub, like the larger publishers saw like 40% layoffs, right? This was a terrible time in the industry for a while. Nothing converted, nothing worked. But in that time, there were some promos that really killed it. I'm going to go into what promos in particular worked before End of America in this very similar market environment as we have now. Trader education takes off, but specifically options trading takes off. And at the same time, the social media explosion starts. So like, get this, like these numbers are crazy. In early 2008, right around the crash, Facebook's literally only had 100 million users. Now, by the end of 2013, it had already reached 1.2 billion users, right? So this explosion in Facebook. And we know that during that time, like, and after that, right, Facebook was a marketing gold mine. YouTube in the early 2010s, it started with only 234 million users and ended with a couple billion, right? And it's now the second largest search engine in the world. So you go back to that time in 2013, that's when Mike Ward spun out Money Map Press from Oxford Club into its own thing. And he publishes Money Morning, takes like a lead gen strategy, and he really takes off. He captures the explosion in trading, I think, really well. And if you think about it, most of the today's like kind of top trader educating companies, a lot of them, like the names that we all know, really came up after the 2008 crash. Like they were here, but they weren't big, right? So like guys like John Carter at Simpler Trading and Tim Sykes and others, like they really took off after 2008. Now, this is happening at a time when we have quantitative easing, right? And it's driving the asset prices of everything up. And we have the longest bull market in history. We see the rise of things like cannabis in those sectors and the fall of it. The same with crypto, right? But that really takes off when Wall Street gets behind crypto and starts driving it up. Again, we have tons and tons of promos, franchises, all these things that are following these big trends that are driven by kind of what's happening in the broader markets, right? On the marketing side during this period, as this explosion in traffic sources comes up, we get the growth of vertical email ad networks. And we have these great founders in our space like Morgan Busby and Mike McDougall and others who create these email acquisition channels for the industry. And that really created a revenue floor for people too, because it allowed people to monetize their lists with advertising revenue, even if they weren't advertising businesses, and gave them traffic sources. And so it really like helped grow this industry, right? Now, during that time too, post 2008, we have essentially the largest expansion of the industry in the industry's history, right? We went from an industry that had maybe one or two like that were pushing 100 million, like Stansberry was definitely the biggest, I believe, in pre 2008. And then you all of a sudden have this explosion of companies that are hitting 1, 2, 300 million. And like the whole industry grows, right? And so these two like big trends, right? The macro market trends, the business cycle, and like the macro digital marketing trends are kind of the two wings of our bird. And every time like the business cycle changes, our industry evolves alongside it, right? And that's super important because we are at one of those inflection points right now in my mind. And I think, you know, everybody I'm talking to in this space seems to agree, especially people who have been here before, people who've been through more than one business cycle. And that's why I've been working so hard to kind of get this new ecosystem built with Vince Molinari over at FinTech TV. And I'm going to get into that today because in June in Baltimore, we're going to have our first event for this ecosystem. And I really want you guys to come there, but I want you to understand what we're doing. And the biggest thing about this like idea of changing business cycles, right? There was this great promo that Patrick Beauvais over at Stansberry wrote. I forget what year it was, but it was like it's called The Last Bull Market was the headline. And if I remember it right, the idea embedded in it was essentially this, like, basically this may not be the last bull market, but at a certain age, it becomes your last bull market, right? Like it's the last time that you're going to have it. And so when I think about my career, and I encourage you to think about your career a little bit here too, when we look at like these business cycles, we don't have a whole lot of them in our career, right? Like we've got like 4 to 6 maybe full cycles that you're going to actually be participating in. And when you're early in the career, like I didn't think about it. I didn't think about the way that things happened in the cycle. Um, in terms of like there's a period of uncertainty, there's a period of like kind of like figuring out what's going to happen next, what's going to take off, starting to see like, oh wait, these 3 or 4 sectors, these 3 or 4 marketing channels, these 3 or 4 asset classes are starting to get attention. Um, and as those take off and balloon, basically you're in the winning things or you're not. And if you're not, then you're struggling. And if you're in it, you can be mediocre and do really well. And so when I think about this, like I think about like the decisions that I made in the last business cycle. I figure I'd been in FinPub maybe 1.5 cycles because I came in about 2005. I'd been studying and reading before that, but like I wasn't really in the business starting in 2005. Like I think about some of the decisions I made were really smart. Some were kind of dumb. Some things I got lucky in. And I learned a lot about what I would do different, because there's just a lot of things. Like when I think about this now, like at my age, not to be like the old man in the industry, but those of you who have businesses and who've been here and who are this isn't your first crash in your career in the market. It's not even a crash, but like it's your first difficult period in the market. Like you can take lessons from the previous cycle about both the rise of marketing channels and what you went after and didn't go after, choosing to go after trends that are actually growing or choosing not to, and really apply like that knowledge to how you're going to handle this coming cycle, because it is changing and a new cycle is beginning. Everything's changed, right? Like the geopolitical environment, I think the tech environment is changing, right, with AI and stuff. We're going to see this real new like shift over into kind of a new general, I think, digital marketing environment in general and kind of global market environment overall. And like take 4 to 6 cycles, and you've probably already been through 1 or 2 at least, if you've got some success under your belt, maybe only 1, but you only have a handful of these things in your lifetime, in your career. And that's if you're lucky enough to live long enough, like to go after or to be here for a bunch of them, or unlucky enough to never hit one big enough during one of these cycles to not have to worry about the next one, right? Like, and so like for me, like I feel like I've, like I said, done about 1.5 cycles in FinPub. I learned a lot. I made some like legitimately good decisions, right? Like, and I made some absolutely terrible ones. I've missed some, like a bunch of opportunities. I'd hate to tell you the time that I first, like the price that I first thought about buying crypto at, because there was not 3 zeros after that number. And I didn't get it then. And I like think about like how like bad I feel about my decision-making process there. And I'm also like very grateful though, because like I've seen like the rise of different media platforms and traffic platforms. I know which ones I took advantage of and didn't. And I can look back and see how like, hey, that actually worked out quite well. I can't believe that I missed that particular opportunity or chose not to go after it, right? And so like I feel like one of the nice things about kind of being at the end of a cycle right now is like our eyes are open enough, like you can stop for a second, look back, and really think about like, what do we know is kind of persistent about these cycles? And what would you do different? Like if you were lucky, do you plan on getting lucky again and just kind of going along with the way that you're going? Because like, I don't think that this next one is the last one of my career for me, but it's probably the last of, it's like one of 3 that's left for me to really go after things in my business and things that I've always wanted to do and kind of what I wanted to explore. And so for me, I don't plan on wasting this. Like the cycles that like I went through there with like the markets and things like that, they're all trends that like mattered. Or I should say, those are like the big ones that mattered, but there's a bunch of other ones that, like the capital environment, like that also mattered that I didn't list, but like the capital cycle and stuff like that is important. But like, you kind of get my point with when these big trends in the general financial markets and then in the internet marketing world shift, our whole business shifts too. And so what I'm doing here in June, like it's for me, it's a big part of my bet on the future of FinPub. It's my bet on the future of this next cycle and where I think things are going. And I could be wrong. And so I'm kind of angling in this for being wrong too. I think in this early phase, it's really important to spread the conversation really wide and get into a lot of different things that we think could be taking off in order to make sure that we capture the things that matter. Um, and so one of those things is obviously what's going to happen with AI. That could change our whole fundamental marketing environment. Like right now it's all productivity and efficiency gains and productivity where like I think we're going into a world where the capacity for production in business, especially in info business, in marketing, everybody all of a sudden has kind of like a you know, an Iron Man suit that they're going to get, right? So that every one good worker would be able to have the productivity of maybe 5 to 10 people without AI, right? That's one of those big things. And so that means there's a lot of efficiency gains. It can increase profitability. It can increase like the amount of promos you get out the door, which could do, so there's just all kinds of things there. But like, we're not sure how the rest of that's going to play out, how it's going to change the advertising environment yet, and things like that. And so there are other things though that I do think that are very clear, that very clear trends that are already in process that are going to grow even more. And that's why I've had Vince is coming down with me to do this event in June. You know, calling it the new ecosystem, Media Meets Markets. It's based on a lot of the ideas that I've been sharing over the last couple of years, where I'm talking about how I see media taking a growing role at the intersection of capital markets. And I've also invited somebody else to join us. She's kind of unique. This is someone who's raised personally $15 billion in face-to-face sales. That's with a B, 15 billion. Her name is Mona DeFrari. DeFrari, I'm saying that wrong. She's worked on at elite levels of finance though, like back to the 90s. She was really like in the IPO boom, for instance. And she's been on like the front lines of the business in finance and cap raise for like all the business cycles since the 90s, right? So she's wildly connected. She actually thinks right now, when you look at like that trend of, not the trend, but that cycle of like Wall Street pushing IPOs, then pushing mortgage-backed securities, and then kind of getting into crypto finally, like that if you look at all the alternative asset managers who are like on the leading edges usually of these things, they're all piling into a new asset class. And so she's saying, like, if you look at Blackstone and KKR and like the Apollo Group and Carlyle, and these are all like $200 to $800 billion alternative asset managers, they're all kind of positioning themselves into like a new asset class. And she's actually gonna come tell that story. I'm not going to reveal it here because it's like she's going to tell it way better than me, with much more detail. But that's one of those big things that she thinks is changing. And she's going to talk about how she's positioning herself within that trend, and where like the media world and FinPub world kind of fits within that. And so, so excuse me. So I'm really excited about that. I think that like from a promo standpoint, there's a whole bunch of things just in that one conversation that will kind of play out, because every one of these big trends ends up leading like multiple promos, and building a whole franchise during different cycles, right? But it also means, I think, that right now, like the amount of business opportunities for the media world, the publishing world, both for acquiring customers, doing strategic partnerships that at a brand level that you probably couldn't have done before, adding new revenue sources, all that stuff, like that's kind of what we're going to be talking about at Media Meets Markets on the first day of this event. There's two different things here, because I don't want to make the conversation around the business opportunities outside of the existing product business dominant here, because I don't think there's any reason that should happen at the expense of the existing newsletter publishing business. I think that there's a lot of room to grow on FinPub, and I've talked about that a lot. I do think, though, that there are two broad sets of opportunities, and that's why we're going to split this into 2 different days. One is the focus on the business opportunities for publishers, and the other is an opportunity to help kind of the publishing world, copywriters and marketers, like just sell more newsletter product. And so let me run through the 2 days. I think that on the first day, It's a small group thing just for publishers and executives in the industry. Like this is like the core media meets market stuff where like we're going to be taking folks and introducing them outside to a lot of other deal flow and opportunities. And I'll explain that in a second. And then the second day is going to be just like kind of calling it like Copywriters and Cap Raisers, because I think that there's a ton that we can learn right now from the people who are sitting down face to face with investors at every other level of the finance value chain, investor value chain, about the stories and narratives that they're finding are taking hold with the investors that they're talking to. So I'm going to run into that right here. We're also going to do a bunch of stuff on promo from previous cycles and things that are working now, but I really want to dive into the promos from previous cycles that have like kind of that are rhyming with what's happening right now, because I think that's very relevant. But first, let me talk about June 7th, right? So there's 2 days, June 7th and June 8th. June 7th is a small group. It's for like if you're a founder, if you're an executive, if you're a publisher, and you're really interested in kind of like the business development and strategic development opportunities for people in this industry to connect out into other industries, right? So like you probably know, like I've brought a bunch of founders from our space, a bunch of folks up to the New York Stock Exchange to meet with New York Stock Exchange execs. We were talking about distribution and the power of FinPub to help their companies. Just last week, I took Chris Rowe and Addison Wigging. They came up with me to the exchange. There was a after hours networking party on the floor of the exchange with like open bars, and like there was like the huge, like there was the largest NFT event. So a lot of like the top guys in crypto and NFT were there, and it was a networking party that we had access to. And so if you think about this, like the way I'm looking at media meets markets is it's basically a bridge network, right? Connecting FinPub and media with all these other business ecosystems in capital markets because of all the different business opportunities to connect us. And some of it, like if you're selling advertising, it's clear, like there's just a ton of like new advertising revenue. I did a video a while back on the bull market and financial advertising and how there's like a $10 billion year-over-year increase in financial services advertising. I've talked to like not one, but like 2 or 3 guys now from asset managers in the tens of billions of dollars, 90 to 100 billion and above, who just came online marketing in the last 2 years. Like they were not doing any online marketing. And so we're seeing this movement of all this financial services ad spend that's finally coming in. And it seems weird that in 2023, but it is. It's like just coming in now. And so there's this huge bull market that's going to run in financial advertising. And so that's one of the things that we're putting like folks from our space at the center of, because we have all these great business ecosystems that Vince has already connected on in a very, very deep way, right? So to start with, like you have the NYSE. He also has partnerships with the NASDAQ and the London Stock Exchange and Abu Dhabi, ADGM, right? Global markets. Like he's got the center stage at Finance Week. He's got insider access at Davos and all these other places, right? And so across the board, when you have the conversation with anybody in capital markets anymore, especially if they're a founder in that space, and you talk about the role of media in their business development and capital development processes, their eyes light up. They all are seeing it, and everyone's trying to figure out how to navigate it. And so Vince has a media company on the floor of the exchange. Mona has a media company focused on venture capital. It's called Radivision. So what we're doing is we're putting together a group of players, of people who have business assets that want to kind of take advantage of this. And we're going to, the way I think of it is that, a handful of us together can move industries if we're working in concert, right? It's like kind of like strategic and business development where we're working together as a group, not like partnered and doing things, but I mean, like putting a group of people together that basically represents a lot of retail distribution and going to each of these exchanges and saying, hey, we have enormous amounts of retail distribution in various forms, from paid media to earned media to other media. We would like to meet with your companies who need retail investor distribution and talk about opportunities and all the other people. And so then bringing those people into conversation, going into the fintech ecosystem that Vince has, because he has one of the largest fintech audiences and ecosystems in the world, and talking to them, their founders and the wealth tech founders about how can we do business together? How can we do joint ventures together? Are there opportunities to work together for distribution, for advertising, for joint ventures and partnerships? One of the big trends that I think we're going to see is the rise again of trading tools as a product. We're already seeing it all over the place. There's a lot of reasons for that. I can go into that in a lot more depth, but like, I think that's coming back, and it's coming back big over this next cycle. And so bringing in all of the people who could work with us on these things and do deals with us, right? And so that's kind of what we're going to start. That's the concept for that first day, June 7th. And it is limited. Like the Pendry, we're going to get the Sagamore Pendry. They don't have like a huge, like I didn't get the ballroom for both days. I got the ballroom for the second day. We have a smaller conference room, so I can probably only hold like 35 people, and about 10 of those spots are already taken. So like, if you want to come to that, you're going to have to email me, john@johnnewton.com, or the email address that you have for me already, if you know me. But the second day is open to everybody. And this one is, like, I'm calling it Copywriters and Cap Raisers, because I do think that pitching to raise capital and writing promos has a ton in common. And when I first told Angel Suarez about this event concept, he kind of threw off this line of FTC proof sales secrets of Wall Street's billion-dollar pitchmen, which I love, because it's like we're talking about the narrative-driven promotional ideas that are out there that are not profit claims. And Dylan Jovanet and I had a great conversation. Dylan is founder of Behind the Markets, and he mentioned that recently, like, his best performing copy has no profit claims in it whatsoever, right? Story, and it works, and it's kind of the foundation and bedrock that this business was built on. But like, we've forgotten that because we had this great long running bull market where the FTC hadn't really come in and said, hey, you can't make big profit claims. And we had crypto exploding, and you're having like 5, 6, 7,000% numbers in promos and things like that. And so if you can't do that, it doesn't mean the copy goes away and dies and promo dies. It means that you have to change the way that you're thinking about how you're writing copy, and you have to write in a different model. And we know these models because they already work, right? And so one of my ideas here is that we're gonna come in and talk about the big market narratives in the finance world, in the capital markets world. What's the actual, like, the guys who are writing institutional research, what are they telling asset managers about some of the macro trends, right? What are the and we have some amazing analysts in our space, so it's not to say that their analysis is better. Instead, what it is I want to have like more like a brainstorming session of ideas. It's kind of like an idea generation event, where we talk about these big narratives on the editorial side and on the promotional side that are taking hold across institutional asset managers. We're going to talk about the big stories, the sector stories, the company stories. And then I'm going to bring in a bunch of people who actually make their living pitching investors face to face, to share what they're finding is working right now, to tell the stories that they're excited about to you, and have us kind of riff and brainstorm back and forth about like different promo ideas. And then what I want to do is actually tie that to previous promos that we know kind of work with similar stories, right? And so, like, what's the best way I can describe this one? Like, do you remember back in 2000? Nah, it was post 2008, but it was before End of America really took off, if I remember right. There was a promo called Remade in America, written by a good friend of mine named John McCrae. And the whole concept, it was this phenomenal acquisition promotion. And the theme of it was essentially the reshoring of American manufacturing, right? And it killed it. It did great. And not a lot of things were working at all at that point. So that's a huge thing that worked so well. But that story of the reshoring of manufacturing, right? Like, Mark Twain has that great quote that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Well, right now we have the reshoring of semiconductors to North America, right? There's like five major companies who are building major facilities here, including that big $100 billion one in Ohio, on semiconductors. Now, if you know anything about semiconductors, and I do not know very much, but I do know this now, you know that in order to create semiconductors, you need industrial gases, like manufacturing, and preferably local ones, right? And Russia has been the main supplier of some of those gases, like helium. We're not doing business with Russia, but even if we were, if there's helium locally, we're not going to ship it in from Russia. Well, this is how you take an old idea conceptually, this like patriotic, protectionist, pro-American story that we know kind of works to our audience, with the idea of reshoring semiconductors, drilling down to like a sector like industrial gases or helium, and then going to a company like Total Helium, which was a former client of mine, that I helped with a bunch of stuff a few years back. And they basically have a local supply, and they are now, I think they're a producer, anyway. So what I wanted to do is like, well, we have these big macro stories. Let me bring in somebody like Robert, the founder of that company. Let him pitch his sector to us. How is he pitching it to investors? Because that's half of a CEO's job, right? You got to pitch investors. And then how's he pitching his story? Give him like 7 minutes, and then do something a little bit dangerous, which is put a drink in somebody like Angel Suarez's hands and let him kind of riff back on copy and kind of have a fun idea gen session where we take some of these pitches from whether it's a CEO of a public company or an institutional analyst, or when I have some other folks that I'll tell you about in a second who are coming, they're really cool. And let them tell their narratives and stories and pitches. And then we riff back on how we would tell that story in FinPub, right? Within our frame and audience, and kind of use it to one, educate people who maybe weren't here back before 2008 or in 2008, people who weren't writing copy at the times when you couldn't, when you had to write more story driven copy, but also just to make story driven market narrative copy, like help everybody start to think about how that's done again. And I know I've talked to some, Amber over at MarketWise's new CEO and stuff, and they're doing workshops like that internally. I think we should do that for the whole industry, and we could do a lot more of it, because ideas and promo, like they're the core of publishing. And so my thought here is that like we have these amazing like storytellers in our industry. We have amazing editors and analysts, but it's kind of crazy that we haven't gone out to the people who are telling stories and narratives at every other level of finance and capital markets, and had them come in and work together, tell stories together, and share what we find is working in our side, what they find is working on their side, and actually talk about ideas and promos, right? Because that's really like the meat of what we do. And you can take all the marketing stuff and the conversion stuff, and like if you don't have a strong idea and a strong promo and a strong like way of telling this and grabbing attention, then none of the rest of it matters, right? So like I think about like how like I think a year and a half ago Goldman Sachs published this report, and they're saying that commodities is in a super cycle. And in the last super cycle we had a ton of promos. Like there was this gold promo that Porter wrote, or under Porter's name. I'm not sure if he wrote it or Palmer or someone else wrote it, but it was under Porter's name. And it was like I think it's probably the most perfectly structured forecast promo I've ever seen. And it did something like $19 million. And so I want to review that, right? And go through that. And then I have we have that promo, but then we have one of the greatest funders of gold mines in the world coming. Like, so, my dad always used to tell me, he's like, John, if you're going to be a monkey, you might as well be a gorilla. And so, basically, if you're going to go to the trouble to do something, you might as well go big. And so in the world of financing mining, right, you have like one of the main mining economies is Canada. Canaccord Genuity is like one of the 800-pound gorillas in financing mining. They've got like 90 billion in AUM. And so inside Canaccord, they're like the leading, I think, wealth advisor for mining and resources is this guy called Cam Curry. He runs Inside Canada. It's called Curry Metals and Mining. And he's going to come and he's going to talk to us about how because this is a guy who has to pitch investors on both sides of everything. He's raising money as a wealth advisor. He's funding companies, and he has to sell a company back to investors. Like he's really into it. Like he's getting deal flow that most people can't get because, there's lots of assets and most of them are crap. And he's one of the handful of guys who are always fighting for like the top assets that are coming out of like the mining world. So he really understands it. But he's also like, he talks in copy, which is amazing because he's a salesperson who has to sit there and raise capital. And he's one of the most connected guys in mining. So he's going to come and he, when I say he talks in copy, like he'll drop lines in conversation. Like, John, every bull market starts in stealth mode. And it's awesome. And so I would love to have him come and, I don't care. I don't care if you want to cover anything in gold or not. What I want to do is like bring him to come tell the story that he is telling to investors that is getting a response from them to you so that you can kind of see like, okay, well, what's resonating with investors, what's not, how would I tell this story, what are pieces of this that I might be able to use. And then I'm having him bring in some CEOs of what he thinks are the best companies around, and let them pitch their company. Not because I think you should like listen, like you have to cover their company or write about their company or into that, but to hear how they're telling the story, how they're pitching the story, how they're handling objections, which would be a great thing. Like if you come in and we have like lots of objections to throw at these guys, and how are they doing that, and see what comes out. Because I think that from a promotional and editorial standpoint, that is probably one of the most productive things that we can do. And I was going to try and do this with AI because that's obviously a huge thing, and tech is the tech sector in general is awesome. But right now it's it's the big companies. And there's startups who aren't anywhere yet, right? So I think like 20% or something of the new Y Combinator class has something like, or all generative AI plays. But like right now, it's Microsoft and Google and like those guys. And so we're not going to get them to come in. Sorry. But there are a lot of these other sectors that we can get guys in for. And so I'm working really hard to get a bunch of folks, and we got some really cool ones. Like I said, Cam is coming. Mona, like I told you, she's raised $15 billion. Cam, he's raised in a single year, I think like there was 2021, like there was $10 billion worth of financing in the mining sector in like Canada, and like 10% of that was just him. So like he knows how to pitch resources. And so I think these are going to be kind of gold mines of copy ideas and editorial ideas. And so I've already talked to a bunch of publishers, like Addison, I think wants to come be on a panel because he's like, we should be talking about the ideas again. Frank Curzio, I was talking to Andrew over at Investor Place. I think he's coming and brings people. I'm really excited about like this, of going back into promo and ideas. And so this is like the two things that we're doing at this event. I'd love to have you come join me in June. I know this is kind of a fast turnaround. It was kind of a last minute thing that I've been working on, but we weren't sure we were going to launch this one just yet. But what the hell, like I hate sitting on my hands. So there's 2 days. If you are a founder or executive and you are in the space where you really are looking at, like, especially if you're a media seller, like you have a media business, but also if you are in FinPub and you are looking to do deals with the fintech space, the wealth tech space, with other capital markets companies, you want to kind of come up and talk to the NYSE and things like that, then you're going to want to contact me, send me an email either at john@johnknudsen.com, or if you have my number, text me, or if you have or call me. If you have my email, another email address of mine, like I'll respond to that, I'm sure too. But I have a handful of email addresses. If you don't know me in terms of like, we haven't talked before, john@johnknudsen.com. For the rest of you, like there will be a button on this page, register for the June 8th event. That is, Copywriters and Cap Raise is part of Media Meets Markets. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Like, I mean, I do have Angel Suarez coming because I think he's going to be the funnest kind of to get the ball rolling with brainstorming ideas with these guys. But we're going to do a lot of like serious market analysis, tell market narratives. What are the narratives that are working? What are the things that are going to, we see are coming down the road? I have Matt Warder coming again. Matt's been amazing about doing his combination of macro research and search engine research to kind of predict what trends and thematics are going to work. And hey, they keep working. So he's going to update that. And we're going to tie the narratives in with it. So that you guys can see like how would you start to write promo here, and if you have copywriters, if you have editorial staff, we'd love to have them there. This is again something I think will be really, really helpful for the industry in terms of creating promotions that convert right now. And then we're going to review, like I said, a lot of the past promotions from previous cycles and what they worked. Like Clayton had this great promo in 2009 March, right? This is like the worst part, like the bottom, like we had all the horror had happened and everyone's just kind of standing around shell shocked, and he writes a $15 million promo. And there's two parts of that promo. There's the $1 million contrarian portfolio, right? So like, hey, I think Martin was going to put $1 million in an account and they were going to have that follow the recommendations, right? So that's a trust building thing. Like, we are so confident we're putting $1 million in. And the other thing was a long short promo. We think this is going to happen and it will make money, but if we're wrong, then we'll make money here. And I thought about that, and there was actually a lot of long short promos during that period of uncertainty. And in moments like this where things are uncertain and people are feeling like, I don't know what's going to happen next, having that kind of a dynamic is really cool in promo. So I'm going to pull up some of those and kind of share that with everybody too. I think that there's a ton of stuff like that that we can do. And if you have any ideas about different promos and things that worked back then, like Nicholas Brack had the biblical money code, which was amazing. Huge front end winner. Let me know, bring it up. Let's talk copy, promo, and ideas. And that's again June 7th and 8th in Baltimore at the Sagamore Pendry. Looking forward to seeing everybody. All right, take care.